Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're tackling a really big one. How the technology we use more and more every day impacts, well, our ethics, what we think is right and wrong. If you're trying to make sense of our digital world, this is pretty crucial stuff. Our mission here really isn't to tell you what to think, but to help understand the key issues, things like fairness, privacy, the environment, so you can navigate it all without feeling, totally swamped by the tech details.
Exactly. And we've covered a lot of ground looking into this discussions about fairness, how tech actually works, what happens to our personal info, the environmental side of things, and even some of the bigger philosophical ideas behind it all. We're going to try and pull out the most important and, frankly, most interesting bits for you.
Okay, great. So let's jump right in with something pretty fundamental. Does technology, does it tend to level the playing field, or does it sometimes make the gaps we already have in society even wider? That feels like a critical place to start.
It absolutely is. And at the heart of this is what people often call the digital divide. Now, you might first think, okay, that's just about who has a phone or a computer and who doesn't. But it's actually much more complex than that now.
Right.
It involves the quality of your internet access, like is it reliable, fast enough? And then there's your ability to actually use the digital tools effectively, digital literacy, we call it. And ultimately, it's about whether you can properly participate in a world that relies so much on tech. Studies show students without good home internet often fall behind. That's a huge early disadvantage.
Yeah, it's not just having the phone, like you said. It's can you actually use it to apply for that job online or access school resources or connect with people? If your connection is terrible or you just don't know how to navigate things, you're still kind of shut out, even with the device.
Precisely. And the effects, they're really far-reaching. Think about job applications. So many are online only now. If you lack the skills or a stable access, boom, you're at a disadvantage right away. Same for finding essential community information, or even just joining in online discussions about local issues. That initial hope, that tech would benefit everyone equally, it starts to look a bit shaky when you see these gaps.
And how does this unevenness, this digital divide, connect to the bigger picture, like creating a more sustainable future for everyone? It might not seem immediately obvious.
Well, think about it this way. Sustainable development needs everyone involved, right? We need solutions that work for all communities. But if large groups of people can't access information about, say, climate adaptation, or can't participate in planning for greener initiatives because they lack the tech access or skills, then our collective efforts are just weaker. They're less inclusive. We miss out on vital perspectives for building that sustainable future.
That makes a lot of sense. So it's moved beyond just haves and have-nots. You mentioned there's a more advanced way people think about this divide now.
Yeah, definitely. We're also looking at the quality and the relevance of the access people have. Are the technologies being designed and rolled out in ways that actually meet the needs of different communities? Or is it more of a one-size-fits-all approach? Because that can end up marginalizing groups further if their specific situations, their needs, aren't really considered in the design.
Okay, so that's access. Let's shift to another area that raises some pretty serious ethical flags. Algorithms, the code running behind the scenes. How can these seemingly neutral instructions actually lead to unfair outcomes? It feels kind of abstract, but the impact is real, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely real. Algorithms are, essentially sets of rules for computers. They seem objective, mathematical even. But the problem is they can end up continuing or even amplifying the biases that already exist out there in society.
How does that work, though? Isn't it just logic?
The logic itself might be neutral, yeah. But these algorithms, especially in AI, they learn from massive amounts of data. And if that data reflects, say, historical unfairness, like maybe past hiring data shows fewer women in leadership roles, an algorithm learning from that might just learn that pattern.
Oh, okay.
And then it might reproduce it when screening new candidates. It's like it absorbs the bias from the data it's fed.
So the algorithm is basically learning from our potentially biased past, and if we're not careful, it just perpetuates it.
Exactly that. And we see this potentially causing discriminatory results in all sorts of areas, not just hiring. Think about getting a loan, facial recognition systems, even things used in the criminal justice system. And because it's often hidden inside the tech, these biases can be really insidious, hard to spot, hard to challenge.
So just to be crystal clear then, how do these algorithms end up causing unethical outcomes? It really boils down to that training data.
That's the core of it, yes. The data they learn from fundamentally shapes their decisions. If the data is biased, the algorithm's output is likely to be biased too, sometimes even more so.
And connecting this back to sustainability, how does algorithmic bias undermine that goal? It seems like a different kind of problem.
Well, think about resources. If algorithms are unfairly distributing access to things needed for, say, climate resilience, maybe directing aid or infrastructure investment in biased ways that directly hurt social justice. And sustainability isn't just about the environment, it's also about fairness and equity within that transition.
Right.
Biased algorithms can block that.
Right, it's all tangled together. Okay, let's switch gears again. Something I know worries a lot of us. All the personal information being collected constantly. Data privacy and security, what are the big ethical issues there?
Yeah, the sheer amount of personal data being gathered now is, well, it's staggering. Unprecedented, really. And look, this data can be used for good things, for convenience, for insights, but the potential downsides are huge. We're talking data breaches, where sensitive info gets stolen. We're talking about surveillance, whether it's companies tracking us or governments watching, and just the misuse of our information in ways we never agreed to or maybe didn't even realize. It chips away at privacy.
Yeah, it often feels like this constant trade-off, doesn't it? You get this cool free app, but the price is, well, your data. More and more of it.
And that hits on a really fundamental ethical point.
Yeah.
The right for individuals to have some control over their own information. We should, ideally, have a say in how our data is collected, how it's used, who it's shared with. You need strong data protection rules, ethical handling practices by companies. Otherwise, trust just evaporates.
And if that trust does break down, what are the wider ripple effects, especially thinking about sustainability again?
If people become deeply suspicious of tech, or the companies behind it, because of privacy fears, they might resist using digital tools that could genuinely help with sustainability. Think smart grids for energy saving, or apps for coordinating local recycling. If people think, oh, this is just another way to track me, they might opt out. That lack of trust can really slow down progress. We hear terms like surveillance capitalism now, highlighting these very dilemmas around autonomy.
Okay, let's talk about the planet directly. We're hearing more about the environmental footprint of our digital lives. It's not just the old phones piling up in landfills, is it?
No, not at all. E-waste is definitely a major issue, don't get me wrong. But the environmental impact of tech is much broader. It covers the whole life cycle. Think about mining the raw materials, rare earth minerals, often extracted in damaging ways, sometimes with terrible labor conditions. Then the energy used in manufacturing the devices, the pollution created. And then there's the massive energy footprint of the data centers running 24/7, powering the cloud, streaming services, everything.
Wow, okay, so from digging stuff out of the ground to make it, to powering it while we use it, to dealing with it when we throw it out, there's an impact at every single step.
Exactly. And add to that the rapid pace of upgrades. We're constantly encouraged to get the newest thing, which just accelerates this cycle of consume and discard. It puts a huge strain on resources and creates mountains of waste.
So what can be done? We hear about recycling, but is that really enough to tackle this scale of problem?
Recycling is important, definitely part of the puzzle, but we need to think bigger towards what's called a circular economy. That means designing products differently in the first place, making them more durable, easier to repair, easier to upgrade, maybe modular, and then when they really are at the end of their life, making sure we can effectively recover those material and feed them back into the system. Moving away from this throwaway culture is key.
And the connection to environmental sustainability goals here seem, well, pretty unavoidable.
It's a direct conflict, really. Environmental sustainability is all about minimizing harm, conserving resources, thinking long-term. If our tech habits involve depleting finite resources, generating pollution, and consuming vast amounts of energy, often from fossil fuels, well, that's working directly against sustainability.
Yeah, it's a lot to grapple with. Maybe it helps to step back. How do different ways of thinking about ethics, about right and wrong, help us sort through these challenges?
That's a really good way to frame it. Looking through different ethical lenses can offer some clarity. For instance, one approach is virtue ethics. This focuses on character, what kind of person or company or society do we want to be. It emphasizes virtues like responsibility, prudence, fairness, justice in how we develop and use tech. Sustainability itself could be seen as a virtue here.
So it's asking, what are our duties? Who's responsible for making sure tech is used well?
In a sense, yes, though responsibility is key. Another perspective, deontological ethics, focuses more explicitly on duties or rules. Here, you might say we have a duty to protect privacy, a duty to avoid causing harm, a duty to ensure fair access, and importantly, maybe a duty to protect the environment for future generations.
Okay, so that's about fundamental obligations, almost regardless of the outcome.
Kind of, yeah. Then you have consequentialism. Maybe the best-known version is utilitarianism. This looks at the outcomes. This is the right action is the one that produces the best overall consequences, maximizes well-being, minimizes harm for the greatest number. So you'd weigh the benefits of a technology against all its potential harms, including long-term environmental and social ones.
Right, the classic weighing of pros and cons. But considering everyone affected, long term.
Exactly. And then there's social contract thinking. This views things like technology governance as arising from an implicit agreement in society. It stresses fairness, equality, democratic control, ensuring tech serves the common good, which nowadays absolutely includes sustainability. And crucially, across all these, we have to remember, ethical norms aren't universal.
Ah, yeah.
Cultural values really shape how people view things like privacy or state surveillance, or even which sustainable technologies feel appropriate. We need a culturally sensitive approach, not just assuming one size fits all ethically.
That's a vital point. What's okay in one place might be totally unacceptable somewhere else. And what about the companies? The ones making and selling all this tech, what's their ethical load here?
Oh, huge. Corporate responsibility is central. Tech companies have ethical obligations regarding all these things, bias in their algorithms, how they handle user data, their environmental impact, their labor practices throughout the supply chain. There's a growing expectation, I think, that they need to be proactive about this stuff, not just react when something goes wrong, to really try and build tech that benefits society. As we start to pull these threads together, one of the sources we looked at had this really thought-provoking idea that technology basically holds up a mirror to humanity. It shows us our values, our priorities. What did you take from that?
Yeah, that's a powerful metaphor, isn't it? The mirror. It suggests that the tech we choose to create and how we choose to use it isn't neutral. It actually reflects what we collectively care about. Are we prioritizing sheer efficiency, even if it damages the planet? Are we chasing convenience so hard we're willing to give up huge amounts of privacy? Is novelty more important than connection? Technology forces us to look at those choices and what they say about us. It's like you can see our collective desires, maybe our flaws too, just reflected in the tools we build and embrace.
Precisely. And it pushes us to ask those really big questions about ourselves, doesn't it? What kind of future are we actually building with all this? Is it just about progress in a narrow sense, faster and newer? Or are we genuinely thinking about justice, about sustainability, about human flourishing in a broader way? The ethical questions about tech are ultimately questions about us.
That's a really profound way to put it. Our tech reflects who we are. So just to wrap up this deep dive, can you quickly recap the main ethical hotspots we've covered?
Sure. We looked at that critical issue of equity and access the digital divide, making sure tech doesn't leave people behind. We dug into algorithmic bias, how seemingly neutral code can perpetuate unfairness. We talked about data privacy and security, that huge concern about our personal information. And we highlighted the often overlooked environmental impact, the whole life cycle cost of our gadgets and infrastructure.
And crucially, these aren't just separate boxes, are they? They all link together and they all impact that bigger goal of sustainability.
Absolutely. They're deeply interconnected. Addressing these ethical challenges is fundamental if we want to move towards a future that's both truly sustainable and genuinely equitable.
So, as you go about your day, interacting with technology in countless ways, we hope this discussion gives you some food for thought, a framework maybe for thinking about these ethical layers, and maybe take that moment to look at humanity's mirror, held up by the tools we make. What does our relationship with technology really reveal about what we aspire to and what we're actually capable of?
And if you do want to dig deeper, the sources we drew on include great resources from organizations like the UN Environment Program, the OECD, the IE, the EFF, lots to explore there. Think of it as an invitation to continue your own deep dive.